Hey guys, tonight we drift into the foggy world of sagas and seawater, where history and myth blur like the shoreline on a misty morning. You're not sitting in your room anymore, you're somewhere in a damp, northern farmstead, with the smell of wet hay, sheep wool, and wood smoke curling through the air. The story belongs to Ragnar Lothbrok, or maybe to you, because tonight you are Ragnar. A real man, a maybe man, or just a legend stitched together by storytellers and monks who love to exaggerate. Either way, you're the one trudging out into that cold Scandinavian dawn. And, let's be honest, you probably won't survive this, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where you're tuning in from, so drop your location and your local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born in the early 9th century, if we believe the sagas, those scholars keep reminding everyone that exact dates are about as fuzzy as a sheepskin cloak left out in the rain. Some say you lived in Denmark, others Sweden, even Norway gets a claim. What's certain is that your childhood isn't golden, it's muddy, chilly, and filled with chores. Your small wooden home smells of peat fires, and the only toys you get are sticks you pretend are spears. Your family tends sheep and goats on uneven ground that never seems to stop being damp. You learn quickly that survival is about rhythm, chopping wood before winter, mending nets before summer, storing dried fish before storms roll in. It's not glamorous, no dragons yet, but these farm skills keep you alive. Historians still argue whether young boys like you were trained as warriors from the start or if you were just tossed into chores until you could carry a real axe. Probably both, because what's life without a little back pain at age 12? But here's a quirky tidbit. Some sagas claim you had a habit of wearing wool trousers so shaggy they earned you the nickname Lothbrok, meaning hairy breeches. Imagine trudging around with wool pants so fuzzy that centuries later, people are still talking about them. Not exactly the heroic armor of a dragon slayer, but hey, fashion statements last longer than reputations. You grow up listening to old men by the hearth spinning tales of distant seas and strange kingdoms. Their stories feel half like history and half like tall tales, giant serpents guarding treasures, kings dripping in gold, and monks who pray instead of fight. You sit there wide-eyed, absorbing every detail, every bit of fire-lit exaggeration. The spark of wanderlust gets planted early, still, your world is small. Your days are bounded by the forests, the fjords, and the sound of the sea crashing on rocky shores. In summer, you fish, in winter, you sit under firs and hope the snow doesn't crush the roof beams. The only hint that life might hold more comes when traders pass through, swapping amber and furs for silver coins stamped with foreign kings' faces. You hold one of those coins once, cold, alien, shining, and you can't stop staring. People in your village whisper about the gods often. Odin, who traded an eye for wisdom. Thor, swinging his hammer and scaring off frost giants. Freya, with her cats and her power over love and war. You learn early that your world is governed by moods of gods as unpredictable as the weather. If a storm wrecks the barley crop, clearly Thor was grumpy. If a cow suddenly gives birth to twins, Freya must have smiled. You grow up breathing superstition as naturally as air. There's no school, no parchment, no lessons on math or grammar. Your education is the swing of an axe, the pull of an oar, and the rhythm of song. Poetry is everywhere, skalds chant verses about heroes and gods, and you memorize the cadences by ear. The line between history and poetry doesn't exist yet. You'll discover later that you're being written into both at once. When you're old enough to run faster than the sheep, the older boys rope you into games that are half sport, half training. Wrestling in mud, racing through forests, mock duels with wooden staves. Broken noses are common, and missing teeth. Consider them a badge of honor. There's no protective gear, unless you count the thick skull your mother swears you inherited from your father. The first time you pick up a real axe, it feels heavy, clumsy, and thrilling. The wooden handle bites into your palm, and every swing leaves your arms aching. But you keep at it, because you know that one day, swinging this tool will decide whether you come home a hero, or not at all. And though you're still just a farm boy, deep down, the sagas that will be told about you start writing themselves in your restless imagination. You fall asleep most nights to the sound of wind rattling the wooden shutters, dreaming of places you've never seen. Maybe you dream of slaying dragons. Maybe you dream of sailing seas so wide you can't see the other side. Or maybe, on coldest nights, you just dream of warmer blankets. Either way, you're growing into the boy who will someday be remembered, or invented, as Ragnar Lothbrok, farm boy with big ambitions, and while you're still just trudging through sheep muck, the world beyond your farm is already stirring, waiting for you to pick up that axe and step onto a longship. The first time you see the boats push off at dawn, it's like watching freedom slip across the horizon without you. Your older cousins and neighbors leap aboard, laughing and shouting, their shields slung over their shoulders, the prows of their ships carved like snarling beasts. The morning air is sharp with salt, gulls will overhead, and you're left standing in the wet sand with sheep dung still clinging to your boots. You ache with envy, because they're not just going fishing, they're raiding. Raids are the teenage road trips of the Viking world, loud, dangerous, and half the fun is bragging when you get back. No one waits for permission, you just gather enough men, enough wood, and enough nerve. You finally get your chance when you're big enough to row in or without fainting. The older men grumble but let you join, maybe because they're tired of your constant pestering. Or maybe they think you'll be the first to fall, which leaves more silver for them. The ship smells of tar and pine, freshly sealed against the sea. The benches are narrow, the oars long, and your hands blister almost instantly. Salt water sprays your face as the boat cuts across the waves, and suddenly you're not a farm boy anymore, you're a raider, one of those terrifying shadows foreign monks will later write panic letters about. Historians still argue whether these early raids were coordinated by kings or just small gangs of restless youths. But you're too busy trying not to vomit to care. You land on some poorly defended coast, maybe Northumbria, maybe Frisia, it doesn't matter, because the trick is to strike fast. A monastery appears on the horizon, stone walls glowing pale in the morning sun. The bells toll, not with welcome but with alarm. You run with the others, your axe heavy in your hand, your heart pounding. The smell hits you first, incense, wax, and fear. Monks scatter like startled birds, their robes flapping, their eyes wide. They're not warriors, they're keepers of books, not swords, and here's the quirky detail, Vikings loved raiding monasteries because, honestly, monks were like human treasure chests. They didn't fight, but they hoarded gold and silver in chalices and reliquaries, convinced that glitter pleased their god. You don't know much about their god, but you're grateful he apparently likes expensive trinkets. You scoop up cups, candlesticks, and whatever else shines, while others shout and laugh around you. The thrill isn't in the loot, though, it's in the shock of realizing you can walk into another man's world and take it. The adrenaline makes your hands shake as you sprint back to the ship. Behind you, smoke curls upward, blackening the sky. The raid is over in minutes. The boat pushes off, loaded with spoils, while on shore, monks weep and pray. Later, those monks will write in careful Latin about heathen devils from the sea, and congratulations, that's you. When you get home, your pockets lined with foreign silver, your village greets you like a hero. Mothers look at you differently, fathers nod with approval, and the skalds have new material for their songs. You stand taller, suddenly aware that you've crossed an invisible line. You're not just a farm boy anymore, you've tasted conquest. And, yes, your shaggy wool trousers are now extra famous for sprinting across foreign fields. Of course, raiding isn't all fire and glory. Some trips end in disaster, storms capsize ships, villagers fight back, or rival bands steal your plunder. You hear stories of ships lost with all hands, swallowed by angry seas. Scholars still debate how often these young raiders died versus how often they triumphed, but the truth is simple: every time you step on that boat, you gamble your life for treasure. But you don't care. You're addicted now. The sea calls louder than the bleating sheep ever did. You spend long evenings staring at the horizon, imagining lands you haven't yet seen, convinced that somewhere beyond lies a world richer than any farm could offer. And even as the winter winds rattle your wooden walls, you dream of springtime raids, new monasteries, and the thrill of sprinting home with your arms full of stolen chalices. By now, your mother probably wishes you'd just stuck to herding goats. But the sagas aren't written about goat herders. They're written about men who leap onto ships at dawn, hearts pounding, ready to gamble everything. And that, for better or worse, is the path you've chosen. You sit on the damp grass by the fjord, staring at the water as if it's a mirror hiding secrets. Raiding is thrilling, sure, but your mind keeps drifting further. While your neighbors are content with the next easy plunder, you keep wondering what lies beyond the edges of the maps that don't even exist yet. You've heard rumors, half whispered by traders and drifters, of lands so rich the rivers sparkle with silver, of fertile fields that make your rocky soil look like goat fodder. You want to see it all. The problem is the boats. The old ones are sturdy enough for hugging the coastlines, but you know they'll never take you across the great unknown. You can feel it in the way the waves slap against their sides. Like trying to cross an ocean in a bathtub. You're not a shipwright, but you pester every carpenter, every elder, and every trader for knowledge. You sketch crude designs in the dirt, imagining hulls longer and sleeker, sails that can catch more than just a whisper of wind. Historians still argue whether Ragnar himself designed ships or just leaned on brilliant builders, but in your mind, you're already shaping the future of raiding. One quirky tidbit that always makes you grin: some sagas say you once crafted boats with dragon heads so fierce they frightened spirits away from the sea. Whether that's a practical shipbuilding detail or just a poetic exaggeration is anyone's guess. But admit it, it sounds a lot cooler than saying you argued with carpenters about plank angles. Your fascination doesn't stop with wood and sailcloth. You spend hours listening to seafarers tell tales of lands across the Whale Road, the Viking nickname for the sea. Some speak of England, with its rich monasteries and gold-hoarding kings. Others whisper of Francia, where the rivers run wide and the walls rise higher than a man can throw a spear. A few even claim there's a place farther still, where the sun feels warmer and grapes grow thick on vines. You don't know if they're exaggerating or if you'll ever see those places, but your bones buzz with curiosity. Meanwhile, your farm chores keep yanking you back to reality. The sheep don't care about your grand ambitions, they still wander off into bogs and meat herding. But even while you chase them, you find yourself staring at the horizon, imagining longships slicing through foam. Every creak of wood, every ripple of water seems to whisper, "Go west," and it's not just wanderlust, it's survival instinct. Scandinavia's rocky fields can only feed so many mouths. You look around and see too many brothers. Cousins, neighbors, all competing for the same patchy farmland. Silver isn't just for showing off, it's for buying food when the harvest fails. You know deep down that raiding isn't only about glory. It's about necessity. Still, your dreams outpace necessity. You want to do more than steal chalices from monasteries. You want to carve out a kingdom, to build something lasting. That thought is dangerous. Kings and jarls don't like ambitious farm boys, but it flickers in your chest like a stubborn ember. At night, by the fire, the skalds sing sagas of men who dared to reach beyond the known world. You hang on every word, imagining your name tucked into those verses someday. Maybe they'll call you Dragon Slayer. Maybe Bear Wrestler. Maybe just Ragnar, the man who went farther. Scholars today still argue which parts of your story are myth and which are fact, but in this moment, none of that matters. You believe in your own legend before it's even written. Sometimes, though, reality cuts through. One winter storm rips apart several fishing boats in your village. The sea swallows men whole, leaving widows and empty beds behind. You stand on the shore, the wreckage at your feet, and wonder if the gods are warning you or daring you. But the fear doesn't root deep, it only makes you more determined to master the sea instead of fearing it. Your dreams of sailing west become an obsession. You pester shipwrights until they humor you, you test planks by jumping on them like an impatient child, and you practice tying knots until your fingers bleed. The others roll their eyes, but secretly they're curious, too. Curiosity spreads, and before long, people are whispering about you as more than just a raider. They're calling you something bigger, and so, as you stand at the water's edge once more, the smell of tar and pine thick in the air, you know the world won't stay small for long. The farm boy is fading, and in his place, a sailor, a dreamer, a soon-to-be legend takes shape. You meet her not in some quiet meadow or at a feast, but on the battlefield, where mud clings to your boots and adrenaline hums like a drum in your chest. Lagertha. The sagas say she fought with her hair loose around her shoulders, a shield on her arm, and a glare that could freeze a man faster than a northern winter. You don't woo her with flowers or sweet words, you win her by surviving her spear. According to the stories, you first see her when you ride out to help free her homeland from some usurper's grip. She's not cowering in the background, she's in the thick of it, hacking through enemies as if she's been waiting all her life for this excuse. You, being equal parts impressed and terrified, can't decide if you want to fight beside her or run the other way. Scholars still argue whether women like Lagertha actually fought in large numbers or if her saga is a colorful exaggeration, but let's be real, the idea of a shield maiden is way too cool for poets to resist. Quirky tidbit: one saga claims that when you tried to court her afterward, she wasn't exactly eager to hand over her heart. She set a literal guard dog and a bear at her door to scare you off. And instead of thinking, wow, this woman clearly doesn't want visitors, you grabbed your spear, killed the bear, and, depending on the version, either killed the dog or calmed it. Smooth move, right? Nothing says romantic like wrestling guard animals. Eventually, though, your persistence pays off. She agrees to marry you, maybe because you proved your bravery, maybe because she secretly admired your stubbornness, or maybe because, after a battle, she figured you'd make a decent partner who could split firewood. Domestic life with Lagertha is anything but calm. She's fierce, proud, and entirely uninterested in being a quiet background character in your saga. You quickly learn that running a household with a warrior wife means debates often end with the sound of steel being sharpened. Your early years together are filled with laughter, sharp words, and the chaos of shared ambition. Some days you're raiding side by side, your shields knocking together as you charge into enemy lines. Other days, you're arguing over whether to store the dried fish by the hearth or in the shed. Ordinary marriage problems, Viking edition. Children soon arrive, and with them, the realization that parenthood is harder than raiding. Babies cry louder than battle horns, and diaper duty, though no one writes sagas about it, tests your patience in ways no blade ever could. Still, you beam with pride as your family grows, even if you don't always know how to hold an infant without looking like you're gripping a live eel, yet ambition has a way of pulling you away from home. The sea calls, the promise of silver gnaws at your soul, and no matter how much Lagertha loves you, she doesn't always love the distance your dreams create. You feel the tension, part of you wants to stay in the warm glow of the hearth, listening to your children laugh, while another part of you aches for the roar of waves and the thrill of conquest. Some sagas say your marriage with Lagertha doesn't last forever, that eventually, you part ways, your paths diverging like two rivers that once ran side by side. Historians still argue whether she was real, symbolic, or a poet's invention, but in your heart, she's flesh and blood, a warrior who marked your life. And even when the sagas later tangle her story with myth, you remember her not as a legend, but as the woman whose laugh echoed louder than war cries. For now, though, you're young, you're in love, or as close to it as a raider can be, and the world feels wide open. You've got a fierce partner at your side, a growing reputation, and dreams too big for any farmstead. Together, you and Lagertha are not just surviving, you're shaping the kind of story that poets will never stop retelling. Your name begins to slip from hearthside whispers into the halls of Jarls. Fame doesn't creep quietly, it barges in, loud and unavoidable, usually with the stink of sea salt and smoke clinging to your cloak. Every raid you lead, every haul you bring back, builds a reputation bigger than your farm ever could. People start calling you not just Ragnar, but Ragnar Lothbrok, the man in the shaggy breeches, the bold raider, the one who laughs too loudly when silver spills onto the floor. You find yourself summoned to Denmark, or maybe Sweden, depending on which saga you believe. Kings and Jarls are always sniffing out talent, like wolves deciding whether to fight you, feed you, or keep you around until you outgrow your usefulness. They test you in their courts, watching the way you hold yourself, listening to the way others talk about you. And you? You know how to make an impression, part charm, part defiance, part showing up with just enough treasure that they can't dismiss you as some mud-smeared farm boy. The court is a strange place. You're used to the open air, the sting of salt, and the sound of waves. Suddenly you're in long halls with carved beams, smoky hearths, and too many eyes watching. The air smells of roasted meat, spilled ale, and ambition. Here, a smile hides as many blades as a scabbard. Historians still argue whether Ragnar ever truly ruled Denmark or was simply a famous warlord passing through the orbit of real kings. But one thing's certain, you made them nervous. And nervous men make mistakes. A quirky tidbit floats through the sagas. Some claim you once won favor with a king by presenting a pair of enchanted pants. Yes, pants. Supposedly charmed to protect you from harm. Imagine that, the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok, remembered not just for raids or battles, but for magical trousers. You almost want to laugh, but then again, if monks centuries later kept writing it down, maybe you leaned into the joke. After all, being known for shaggy breeches is still better than being forgotten altogether, but with fame comes envy. Other Jarls look at you and see a threat. They whisper in dark corners, stirring jealousy like stew on the fire. Allies become rivals with the ease of flipping a drinking horn. You sense it when toasts grow too sweet, when smiles linger too long, when warriors measure you from across the hall. One day they clap you on the shoulder, the next, they might slip a knife in your ribs. Viking politics, after all, isn't all that different from modern office politics. Just with more axes, still, you thrive. You raid deeper into foreign lands, bringing back treasures and stories that inflate your legend. Children chant your name in village games, skalds weave you into verses, and young men beg to join your crew. Every success makes you harder to ignore, harder to contain. You start to feel the pull of leadership, not just over a single ship but over fleets. You can almost see it, prows lined up like wolves at the hunt, sails fat with wind, all moving under your command. Of course, power has a price. You can't keep raiding without bumping into rivals who want the same coasts, the same silver, the same fame. Skirmishes break out not just against foreign kings but against your own kind. Viking against Viking, brother against brother, cousin against cousin. And in those moments, you realize the sea isn't the only dangerous battlefield. The hearth, the hall, the whisper in the dark, those are just as deadly. Yet you play the game, balancing charm, intimidation, and sheer recklessness. When kings demand tribute, you bring them spoils but keep the best hidden. When rivals sneer, you outdo them on the next raid. And when poets exaggerate your victories, you don't correct them, you let the myths grow. Because deep down, you know something important. In this world, reputation is more valuable than silver. Silver can be stolen, but a name that rings in every hall, that can't be taken, so you keep pushing, keep raiding, keep laughing too loudly in smoky halls. The farm boy who once chased sheep through muddy fields is now a man who makes kings uneasy. And though you don't yet rule outright, you can feel it, the tide is shifting. Fame is a current, and you're learning how to ride it farther than anyone before you. The first time you sit across from a foreign king, the air is thick with tension, and with smells your nose isn't used to. Roasted pheasant, strange spices, waxy perfumes. The halls of these rulers in Francia or England feel almost alien compared to your smoky longhouse. Their floors are stone, their goblets gilded, their clothes dyed in colors so rich you'd swear they were stolen from rainbows. And there you are, a shaggy-breeched raider who just weeks ago was ankle-deep in sheep muck. It's not all feasting and music, though. Every moment at these courts is a gamble. You're not here because they like you, you're here because they fear you. Kings don't share tables with strangers unless those strangers arrive with enough ships to burn their countryside. Historians still argue whether Ragnar ever truly parleyed with Charles the Bald of Francia or Aella of Northumbria, but sagas and chronicles alike describe Vikings standing in those candlelit halls, dripping seawater and menace. A quirky tidbit the chroniclers left behind: Vikings often demanded what they called Danegeld, basically a protection fee. Imagine striding into a royal palace and saying, "Pay me or I'll burn your city." And then, here's the kicker, kings actually paid. Not because they liked the deal, but because rebuilding a city was costlier than filling your purse. You, of course, lean into this arrangement with a grin. Why risk men in battle when you can intimidate a king into handing over silver like a nervous shopkeeper? But diplomacy is slippery. Some kings flatter you with gifts, hoping to keep you busy raiding someone else. Others smile through their teeth, promising friendship while plotting how to trap you the moment you let your guard down. The hardest part isn't swinging your axe, it's guessing which king across the table is lying faster. You sit through feasts where your cup is never empty and your plate always full, and you wonder, which bite of roasted meat might be laced with poison. Still, there's value in these encounters. You learn things. You notice how the Franks build stone walls that make Viking wooden palisades look like toy fences. You watch English knights train on horseback, their lances lowering like battering rams, and you realize the battlefield is changing. You file it away, not with fear but with curiosity. If your enemies can adapt, so can you. The sagas sometimes exaggerate, painting you as striding into royal halls demanding not just treasure but daughters in marriage. Did you really? Historians still argue. But it makes for a good story, Ragnar walking away with a princess on his arm, smirking like he just picked up another souvenir. Whether it happened or not, the point is clear: your reputation grows not only through raids but through the stories that ripple outward, carried by traders, skalds, even frightened monks who can't stop writing about you. And the kings? They can't decide what to do. Some bribe you, some fight you, some scheme to betray you. But every time you leave their halls, you carry more than treasure. You carry knowledge of their defenses, their weaknesses, their vanity. You might be the barbarian in their chronicles, but you're also a student, watching, learning, planning, because deep down, you're not satisfied with quick raids anymore. You're starting to think about bigger moves, strongholds, cities, perhaps even kingdoms. And as you walk out of yet another foreign hall, pockets heavy with silver, you glance back at the stone towers and wonder, not if you can take them, but when. Your reputation may be filling the halls of kings, but back home, something else is filling the halls of your house: children. One by one, they arrive, small squirming bundles that grow into names that will echo across the ages. Bjorn Ironside, Ivar the Boneless, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, Vitserk, sons whose titles alone sound like heavy metal band names. Each child seems born with one foot already in a saga, as if fate itself wanted your bloodline to become a breeding ground for legends. At first, fatherhood feels awkward. You, who can swing an axe without blinking, stand baffled at the sound of a baby's cry. Do you hold it? Rock it? Pass it back to the mother before it explodes? And yet, there's pride swelling in your chest. You look down at those tiny fists and think, these will someday grip swords. You whisper stories of gods into their ears, telling them of Odin's wisdom, Thor's hammer, and Freya's fierce beauty, even before they can walk. Because in your world, stories are more than bedtime tales, they're training manuals. The sagas get creative here. Some say you father children with Lagertha, others with a Slog, the mysterious daughter of a seer. Historians still argue whether these wives and children were all real or symbolic, stitched together from different generations of raiders. But whether or not every detail is factual, what matters is the truth of reputation. Your lineage was remembered as extraordinary. Even terrifying, quirky detail, your son Ivar becomes infamous not for strength, but for weakness. Born with brittle bones, or so the story goes, he couldn't walk without pain. In another time, another family, maybe he would have been left behind. But you see something else in him, a mind sharp as any blade. Where Bjorn is the roaring bear, Ivar is the calculating wolf. He grows into a strategist whose cruelty and brilliance make enemies shiver. Imagine being remembered as the dad who raised a warlord who terrified England, despite never standing tall on two legs. Bjorn Ironside, by contrast, is your golden child of conquest. Tall, fearless, reckless, he earns his name by surviving wounds that would have felled lesser men. His future raids stretch as far as the Mediterranean, at least if we trust the sagas, which claim he once stormed towns in Spain and Italy. Whether exaggerated or not, you know he'll always chase horizons even you didn't dare. Family dinners, needless to say, are lively. Imagine a table where one son dreams of sailing farther than anyone before, another is plotting the downfall of kingdoms, and another is staring at you with snake patterns in his eyes. Probably scheming how to top his brothers. Pass the mead, please, before someone flips the table, and yet, despite their rivalries, your children represent something bigger, your legacy. You start to sense that you're not just raiding for your own fame anymore, you're paving a path for them. Every monastery burned, every king humbled, every chest of silver hauled back across the whale road, it all becomes inheritance, not just of wealth, but of destiny. Still, fatherhood doesn't soften you much. You're not suddenly skipping raids to stay home and knit wool socks. You remain restless, always torn between family and fame. You kiss a child's head one day, then vanish on a longship the next. Chasing rumors of richer coasts. Your sons grow up watching this pattern, learning that in your world, absence can be as defining as presence. They don't resent it, they inherit it. Each boy, in his own way, carries your hunger for more. Historians still argue whether you lived to see all your sons rise to power, or whether later poets stitched their deeds back onto your saga for dramatic effect. But in this moment, sitting by the fire, watching them squabble, you don't care about scholars. You just know your house is brimming with future legends. And that, in its own way, makes you laugh. Because you may be famous now, but one day people might not remember you as much as they remember the whirlwind you unleashed into the world, and maybe that's fine. Because sometimes the greatest legacy isn't the story you tell, it's the storytellers you raise. You're restless again. The hearth fire warms your hall, but your blood is itching for something the fjords can't give you. Stories drift across the North Sea, of fat English kingdoms, where monasteries glitter with gold and churches practically beg to be plundered. England, they whisper, is soft. England is rich. England doesn't yet know the shape of your shadow, so you gather your crew. Longships line the shore like dragon-snout teeth, each one sleek, narrow, and built for speed. The men haul them into the water, shields strapped along the gunwales in a neat, colorful row. Oars dip, bite, and pull, and soon you're skimming across the waves, faster than any heavy merchant ship could dream. You stand at the prow, salty spray in your beard, pretending you don't notice that your boots are slowly soaking through. Leather waterproofing wasn't exactly a perfected science. Historians still argue whether they used animal fats or pitch to keep the wet out. As the coast of Northumbria rises from the fog, you feel a thrill. You've raided before, France, Frisia, even further south, but this feels different. This land is green and wealthy, dotted with churches fat with silver chalices, jeweled books, and monks who can't swing a sword to save their lives. Monasteries are the medieval equivalent of hitting a vending machine that just keeps spitting out snacks. Your men storm ashore. At first, resistance is laughable, a few villagers with pitchforks, a hapless guard or two. The real prize is Lindisfarne, or so the sagas claim. Whether you were the very first Viking there or just one of many, the raid becomes legendary. Imagine it, monks in their simple robes, clutching relics while your warriors shove past, grabbing anything that glitters. Bells are melted, manuscripts are tossed aside, because, let's be honest, nobody in your crew is brushing up on Latin grammar. Quirky tidbit: English chroniclers describe the Vikings as wolves among sheep, but they also sometimes record baffling details, like warriors pausing mid-raid to admire exotic church relics or even ask monks for healing charms. It's pillage, but with curiosity. One wonders if you or your men ever pocketed some saint's bone just to see if it worked like advertised. News of your raid spreads faster than fire on dry thatch. English kings scramble, trying to raise defenses, but they're caught off guard. Their armies are slow, their walls weak, their politics tangled. You strike, vanish, and strike again, leaving them dizzy. Each time, the treasure piles higher on your ships. Silver arm rings. Golden chalices, even livestock, because why not bring back some fresh cows if you're already raiding, but you're not just chasing loot. Somewhere deep down, you're chasing something else, proof that you're more than just another raider. Raiding England isn't about survival, it's about scale. You want to be the name whispered in royal courts across the sea, the shadow haunting their prayers at night. And it's working. Historians still argue whether Ragnar Lothbrok himself truly led these famous raids, or whether later storytellers pinned the deeds of many Vikings onto one legendary figure. But in this story, in your story, you're standing right there, wiping blood and salt from your hands. Watching terrified monks scatter like pigeons, England becomes a playground and a proving ground. Each raid teaches you more: which rivers can be sailed up, which villages will pay tribute instead of fighting, which kings will fold quickest under pressure. You're not just swinging axes, you're learning strategy. You're becoming less a pirate and more a commander, a man who can direct chaos like a conductor with an orchestra of blades. And with every haul, your legend grows. Songs about you cross back over the sea, carried by traders and captives alike. In the mead halls of Scandinavia, children press closer to the fire to hear of Ragnar's exploits in the soft English lands. Fathers nod approvingly, mothers roll their eyes but secretly feel the pride too. Still, each raid carries risk. English lords begin fortifying, learning to watch the coasts. One ambush gone wrong could end your saga early. But tonight, with silver piled high in your longship and the smoke of a monastery curling behind you, you're not thinking of death. You're thinking of how far this wave can carry you, and whether England has even begun to see the worst of you yet. England wasn't enough. Not for you, not for men like you. After all, when you've already terrified monks and toppled coastal villages, why not see what lies further south, where the sun bakes the stone walls and rumor says the churches gleam even brighter? The Mediterranean becomes your next horizon, and the journey feels almost unreal, like leaping from one world into another. The longships creak under the strain of the voyage. You and your men sail past the familiar green coasts of England and France, slipping into warmer seas. The air thickens, the sun scorches, and suddenly the food tastes different, the people look different, and even the prayers sound like songs you don't recognize. For men born among fjords and pine forests, these are alien lands. The Mediterranean is practically a theme park of unimaginable treasures. Stories later claim that Bjorn Ironside, your son, was the one who truly carved through Spain and Italy, but sagas often blur timelines. Historians still argue whether you personally sailed there, or if your children extended your shadow. But since this is your life tonight, you're right there on the deck, staring at the glittering coast of Al-Andalus, where Muslim rulers hold cities fortified with towers and scholars debate philosophy in grand courtyards. Quirky tidbit: there are tales of Vikings accidentally mistaking cities for smaller villages and then realizing, too late, that they tried to storm fortified strongholds. One particularly wild account says your men thought they were raiding Rome itself, only to discover it was a fortified town nearby. Imagine the embarrassment, showing up ready to conquer the Pope's city, only to find you've just smashed through some suburb. Raiders, 0, Geography, 1. Still, your raids are no small thing. Ships sail up rivers in Spain, attacking towns unprepared for northern longships. Churches, markets, and even ships in harbors fall to your axes. The sheer boldness of it stuns your enemies. Who expects men from the frozen north to suddenly show up demanding tribute under the blazing Mediterranean sun? And then there's Italy. Here the sagas get deliciously dramatic. Some say you tricked your way into towns by pretending to be merchants. Others claim you used fire and brute force. There's even a legend of you demanding ransom from Rome itself, though historians note this was probably poetic exaggeration. Still, the thought of you swaggering up to the gates of the eternal city and saying, "Nice empire you've got here, shame if anything happened to it," is too good not to savor. The Mediterranean is a treasure chest but also a testing ground. Your men are dazzled by spices, silks, and strange fruits they've never tasted before. Imagine handing a Viking crew an orange for the first time, they'd probably assume it was some magical golden orb. These southern goods filter back home, sparking stories of worlds far beyond the fjords. The raids also sharpen your reputation as more than a local terror. Now, you're not just a problem for England or France, you're a name whispered in the courts of Spain, Italy, and even by the nervous merchants of the Byzantine Empire. Some sources suggest that Norsemen like you even served as mercenaries in Constantinople later on. Maybe you planted that idea yourself, tossing out hints of northern ferocity to anyone who'd listen. Yet the further south you go, the more dangerous it gets. Armies are better organized, cities are stronger, and the climate itself feels like an enemy. Your northern armor turns suffocating under the Mediterranean sun. Salt stings your skin, and the food doesn't sit right after weeks of dried fish and sour bread, but for all the hardship, you feel something addictive: scale. Each raid, each city, each ransom collected feeds your hunger to be remembered not just as a chieftain, but as a figure who dared where others hesitated. You're not content with raiding sleepy English villages, you want to carve your name across continents, and so, when you finally turn your ships north again, sails heavy with plunder and hearts swollen with pride, you know the stories will follow you home. The Mediterranean won't forget you quickly. And neither will the sagas. You return home, silver-laden and swaggering, only to find that the deadliest battles aren't always fought on foreign shores. Rivalries at home have been quietly brewing, and suddenly your fame is a double-edged sword. Allies whisper behind closed doors, envying your success, plotting your fall. You begin to understand that the halls of jarls and kings are as treacherous as any monastery you ever raided. A sword in your back is sometimes just a metaphor for politics, but metaphors can kill all the same. The villagers who once cheered you now watch warily, measuring your shadow. The older warriors in your own band grow restless, muttering about shares, privileges, and glory stolen from them. You realize that leadership requires more than muscle and fear, it demands a delicate balance of charm, cunning, and intimidation. Historians still argue whether these internal conflicts are exaggerated or accurately reflect the life of a high-profile Viking leader, but sagas paint a picture of domestic intrigue almost as thrilling as any foreign raid. Quirky tidbit: the sagas say that one of your rivals tried to humiliate you by planting a goat in your hall during a feast. You didn't just chase it away, you wrestled it to the ground, earning laughter and respect alike. It's not strategy, it's not a battle, it's sheer Ragnar flair. And somehow, that story survives centuries later. You navigate these rivalries like you do the seas. You negotiate, sometimes bribe, sometimes threaten. You find that friends and enemies can be interchangeable, and alliances can turn in a heartbeat. Every meeting in the hall, every toast of mead is a game of perception: who trusts you, who fears you, who is planning to stab you in the back. The thrill of conquest now includes the thrill of survival. Even Lagertha isn't immune to these tensions. You learn that managing a household, a crew, and a legacy is trickier than toppling a monastery. Arguments erupt over spoils, strategy, and honor. Children watch, learning the unspoken rules of power, the ones that don't involve axes or swords, but words, glances, and timing. Your sons, already formidable in their own right, absorb these lessons with wide-eyed fascination and perhaps a bit of mischief, yet in the midst of rivalries, there's opportunity. A rival's misstep, a poorly timed boast, a misjudged threat, each becomes a chance to assert your dominance without spilling blood. You learn that cunning often outweighs strength. Battles can be won with wit. Just as surely as with axes and shields, your mind begins to drift toward strategy, toward vision. You start seeing your territory as a chessboard rather than just a series of raid sites. Which jarl will support you? Which kin can be trusted? Which alliances are temporary, and which will last? Each decision, each maneuver, carries weight far beyond the immediate moment. Historians still debate how much Ragnar's political skill contributed to his legend versus sheer martial prowess, but it's clear that the man remembered in sagas is both warrior and schemer. And in this phase of your life, you embrace both roles fully, realizing that fame and legacy aren't just forged on distant shores. They're honed in your own hall, among those closest to you. By the time you leave the hall after another tense feast, your mind is spinning with plans, betrayals, and possibilities. The thrill of internal power plays is as intoxicating as any raid, as addictive as the sea itself. And for you, Ragnar, it's just another kind of conquest, one that ensures your name, and the names of your sons, will echo long after you're gone. Word spreads faster than your ships ever could. Stories of your exploits, real, exaggerated, or outright invented, drift across the North Sea, whispered in mead halls and scribbled in the margins of monkish chronicles. Parents tell their children about the shaggy-breeched raider who struck fear into English kings and sailed to lands even the sun feared. You're becoming a living myth, and that's exactly how you like it. You notice the shift when strangers arrive at your hall. Traders, warriors, even wandering skalds show up not just for food or shelter but to see you, to meet the man behind the tales. You shake their hands, smile through the salt and grime, and let them spread the stories further. Every embellishment only fuels your legend. Historians still argue which events actually happened and which were poetic license, but it hardly matters, the effect is the same. Your name is spoken in reverent, terrified, and sometimes amused tones alike. Quirky tidbit: one saga claims that after a particularly successful raid, you gave a feast and instructed that a horn of mead be passed to every man who had ever doubted you, before smashing it over their heads if they'd lied. Brutal? Yes. Hilarious? Also yes. Storytelling isn't just about events, it's about flair, and you've got flair in abundance. Meanwhile, your sons are growing into their own reputations. Bjorn practices his swordplay with a ferocity that makes other boys whimper. Ivar, despite his physical frailty, observes, calculates, and plans like a master strategist in miniature. Sigurd watches, curious and cunning, while Hvitserk revels in mischief. You see glimpses of yourself in them, both the reckless raider and the calculating schemer. They're extensions of your ambition, living proof that your story will continue beyond your own life. Raiding continues, of course. England, Francia, and even more distant lands feel the pressure of your presence. Each expedition adds treasure, influence, and fear to your growing portfolio. But you're learning that legacy isn't just about silver or blood, it's about story, memory, and impact. You start instructing your sons in these subtle arts. How to inspire loyalty, how to measure threats, how to bend reality in your favor. Some historians still debate whether teaching children the art of leadership was standard in Viking culture or unique to your household, but either way, your boys soak it up like sponges. Quirky tidbit: one account even claims you invented a type of shield formation to make a retreat look like a victorious advance. Tricking enemies and impressing your own men. Whether that's true or exaggerated, it demonstrates a trait sagas love: cleverness under pressure. You aren't just a brute, you're a thinker, a tactician, and a showman rolled into one, and yet, your fame carries burdens. Every rival knows your name, every king fears it. Assassination attempts, ambushes, and plots become part of daily life. You learn to expect betrayal and use it as a tool, let them plot, and then watch as they stumble over their own ambition. Every mistake by a rival is a lesson in leadership, strategy, and human nature. By now, the legend of Ragnar Lothbrok is not just your own, it belongs to the north, to the seas, to the lands you've touched and the people who fear your shadow. You walk among your men, children, and allies knowing that each step strengthens your story. And maybe that's the truest victory, not silver, not lands, not even the battles themselves, but the echo of your name carried on the wind and sung around countless fires for generations to come. Even as your sons grow and the sagas about you multiply, you can't escape the weight of your own mortality. Each raid reminds you that the sea is fickle and kingdoms are unsteady. Waves can swallow men whole, arrows can find gaps in armor, and storms will laugh at your longships as though mocking all your victories. You've faced death before, of course, sometimes hand to hand, sometimes in the dark corners of halls, but the thought lingers: how long can the shadow of Ragnar Lothbrok truly stretch before it finally collapses? Your ventures increasingly combine ambition and diplomacy. You send envoys, strike temporary alliances, and sometimes demand tribute without unsheathing a sword. Your mind is a ledger, weighing risk against reward, loyalty against fear. Historians still argue whether these political maneuvers were common Viking practice or largely exaggerated in the sagas, but you can feel their weight firsthand. A single misjudged word in a king's hall could unravel everything you've built. Quirky detail: one account claims you once had an elaborate system of sending threatening letters written on shields, rolled like scrolls and sealed with blood. Whether true or poetic license, it captures your flair for drama. Even correspondence becomes an extension of legend, a performance meant to unsettle enemies before the first arrow flies. Your sons are now actively participating in raids, each displaying strengths that complement yours. Bjorn roars through enemy lines like a living storm, Ivar plans attacks with terrifying precision, Sigurd develops a knack for cunning negotiation, and Hvitserk revels in chaos, perfectly unpredictable. They aren't just following in your footsteps, they're carving new trails, building upon your legacy in ways you hadn't imagined. Meanwhile, your enemies adapt. Fortifications rise, rival warlords coordinate, and English kings grow more cautious. Your raids are no longer guaranteed successes, and each venture tests your ingenuity, patience, and leadership more than brute strength ever could. You begin to see the importance of perception. The right rumor, the right threat, the right smile can sometimes achieve what bloodshed cannot. Legends evolve. Monks write frantic chronicles describing you as demon, hero, or godlike warrior. Bards sing of your cunning and ferocity in halls far from Scandinavia. The stories drift into the imagination of future generations, turning Ragnar Lothbrok into both a man and an idea. Scholars debate which parts are real, which are myth, and which were later stitched into the tapestry of storytelling, but for you, it's all immediate. Every action, every word, every battle adds another brushstroke to the portrait that will outlive your mortal life. And yet, amid strategy, sons, and legend, the northern nights call you home. The fjords, the smell of pine and salt, the hearthfire glowing in your hall, these are constants that no amount of fame can replace. Here, you find brief peace, a chance to reflect on all you've accomplished and all you've yet to attempt. You are, after all, still Ragnar, raider, father, strategist, and dreamer. In these moments, it's easy to imagine yourself immortal. Not because your body can withstand every threat, but because stories never die. And that, you realize, may be the closest thing to true power a man like you can ever hope to achieve. Years pass, and the world shifts beneath your feet as if testing your resolve. Alliances crumble, old rivals die, or don't, and new threats appear from directions you least expect. You're no longer the brash young raider who first dipped toes into England's rivers. Now, every decision carries weight, and every choice ripples outward, affecting not just your sons but the fate of kingdoms. History remembers this as the phase where Ragnar Lothbrok evolves from marauder to legend, though historians still argue whether the man behind the myth was capable of true kingship or simply a spectacular warrior whose stories were later magnified. Your sons are no longer children. They lead men, plan raids, and command respect with skills honed under your watchful eye. Bjorn has become a force of nature in Iberia, striking fear into coastal towns. Ivar, cunning despite his physical limitations, manipulates entire campaigns from behind the lines, proving that brute strength is not the only path to victory. Sigurd Snake in the Eye navigates alliances with the precision of a seasoned diplomat, while Hvitserk thrives on chaos, ensuring that enemies never predict what he will do next. Together, they extend your shadow across Europe, fulfilling, and sometimes exceeding, your ambitions. Quirky tidbit: one tale claims you orchestrated a feast where each son had to present a captured treasure. Judged by their cunning rather than violence. The winner received your personal seal, a symbol of favor and future leadership. Whether this really happened or was a storyteller's flourish, it illustrates the way you fused family, legacy, and legend into every action. Despite your accomplishments, mortality whispers more insistently now. Each raid feels heavier, each battle a reminder that the sea respects no man, no matter how clever or fierce. You watch your sons step into roles you once dominated, and a strange combination of pride and unease takes hold. Will they surpass you? Will their names eclipse your own in sagas yet unwritten? English kings, aware of the growing threat of your family, begin fortifying cities and rallying armies more effectively. You realize that direct raids may no longer be as easy, or as rewarding. Strategy and diplomacy gain even greater importance. You send envoys, negotiate terms, and sometimes let threats speak louder than blades. The art of influence, you discover, can be as powerful as the sharpest sword. Legends evolve in real time. Monks, bards, and travelers recount tales that stretch the truth into something almost divine. You laugh privately at the idea of being immortalized in ways you could never have imagined, as a hero, a villain, a monster, and sometimes as a godlike figure walking across Europe with a sword and a cunning smile. Historians still debate which stories are fact, which are fiction, and which were woven together centuries later, but the point remains: the legend lives. Even as your body ages, your mind sharpens. You teach your sons, advise allies, manipulate enemies, and ensure that when you finally step aside, or are forced to, your legacy is secure. You've lived a life many would envy, feared, and perhaps misunderstood, but in every saga, every tale, and every whispered rumor, Ragnar Lothbrok remains unforgettable. Rumors begin to swirl of betrayal, both near and far. You've learned that power invites envy, and envy brings cunning. Rival kings plot quietly, plotting traps disguised as alliances. Some of your own men, once loyal, test limits, wondering if they can outshine the man whose name strikes fear into distant lands. You've survived countless battles, yet these political currents require a new kind of skill, foresight sharper than any axe, patience steadier than any shield. Historians still argue whether the tales of your capture later in life are accurate or poetic invention, but sagas insist your end came not solely by brute force, but through the tangled web of enemies and fate. Quirky detail: one account claims that when a rival king finally ensnared you, you greeted the executioner with a joke about the dryness of the ropes and the poor quality of the shoes. Even facing death, you maintained a streak of dark humor. It's almost impossible not to smile at the idea of Ragnar Lothbrok critiquing footwear while awaiting his doom, your sons, now seasoned warriors in their own right, rally to your legacy. Bjorn continues campaigns in the south, Ivar manipulates political chaos in the north, Sigurd negotiates alliances, and Hvitserk thrives in unpredictability. You watch them rise, a strange mixture of pride and resignation settling in your chest. The next generation will carry forward what you've built, expanding your shadow across the world in ways you could scarcely imagine. Despite the looming danger, you maintain control of your story. Poets, skalds, and storytellers follow your movements, turning your feats into epic narratives even before the dust settles. Monks write frantic chronicles, describing your cunning, ferocity, and flair for drama with exaggerated awe. These stories, woven into myth, ensure that your name will survive the centuries, long after flesh and blood have returned to the earth. The sagas describe your final moments with a poetic flourish. Some say you faced death with a calmness born of experience, others claim you mocked your captors until the end. Historians still debate the exact circumstances, but all accounts agree on one point: Ragnar's life, from humble beginnings to legendary exploits, ended with the same boldness that defined it. Even as the end approaches, your mind drifts across memories, the thrill of the first raid, Lagertha's fierce glare, the laughter of your children, the roar of the sea under your longship. These moments, vivid and eternal, remind you that the essence of a life well lived isn't merely in survival, but in the stories left behind, the echoes that will inspire and terrify generations to come. You may fall, but your legend rises, untouchable by time, immortalized in saga and song. The sagas conclude, but your story, strangely enough, feels like it's just beginning. You look back over the decades of raids, battles, alliances, betrayals, and family moments, each one a brushstroke on the canvas of your life. You, Ragnar Lothbrok, the farm boy turned raider, strategist, father, and legend, can finally see the scope of what you've built, not just plundered wealth, but an enduring legacy woven through bloodlines, song, and story. Your sons carry pieces of you, fragments amplified: Bjorn, the unstoppable force; Ivar, the calculating mind; Sigurd, the diplomatic tactician; Hvitserk, the wild card. Together, they extend your reach beyond what a single life could manage. You begin to appreciate that legacy isn't just about fame or fear, it's about shaping the future, planting seeds in the world that will grow long after you've left it. Historians still argue how much of this is factual and how much is poetic license, but the essence is clear: Ragnar's life is remembered because it mattered, because it left an indelible mark. Quirky tidbit: in some sagas, you're said to have worn different helmets for different raids, some designed to frighten enemies, others for ceremonial flair. You probably weren't this meticulous about headgear in real life, but the image endures because it's so delightfully dramatic. And isn't that what life at your level is really about? Making every action feel like it belongs in legend. Now, as you walk along the shores one last time, feeling the foam lick your boots, you reflect on the paradoxes of your existence. You were feared and admired, ruthless yet cunning, loved and challenged, mortal yet somehow eternal through story. You've seen empires tremble, rivers run red, and monasteries burned, but you've also seen laughter, family, and loyalty endure. Life, in all its chaos and grandeur, has been lived fully. Even in the twilight of your life, the lessons remain. Ambition can inspire, fear can protect, humor can disarm, and story, above all, can outlast steel and flesh. You realize that your immortality doesn't reside in treasure or conquests, but in the narratives that others will carry forward, embellish, and pass down. Every skald who sings your name, every child who hears the tale of Ragnar's cunning or bravery, ensures that you exist beyond time itself, and so, as the sun dips below the fjords, painting the waves gold, you take a deep breath of salty air and let the soft murmur of the sea carry you toward rest. You've lived, you've conquered, and you've become legend. The world will remember. Long after your longship rests in the watery depths, that Ragnar Lothbrok was more than a man, he was an idea, a story, a shadow stretching across centuries. Now, slow your breathing. Let the images of roaring seas, blazing monasteries, and longships slicing through waves drift gently from your mind. Picture Lajertha's fierce smile, the laughter of your sons echoing through your hall, and the silver glint of treasure piled high in the hold. Time stretches, soft and unhurried, as if the centuries themselves pause to honor your memory. The thrill of raids, the tension of battles, the cunning of schemes, they begin to fade into something softer, quieter. Feel the salt air mingle with the warmth of your hall. The crackle of the hearth, the low hum of life continuing even as you let go of the weight of legend for a moment. Let each detail dissolve gently, the clanging of swords, the shout of warriors, the plotting of rival kings, they all soften into a distant murmur. Your story, while wild and full of fury, also holds moments of tender humanity, the joy of your children, the loyalty of your companions, the rare peace of home after a stormy voyage. Carry these sensations with you as the night settles around your mind, easing every ache and worry into the background. You've lived fiercely, and now, in this quiet, allow yourself the luxury of rest. The waves lap gently at the shore in your imagination. The wind whispers across the fjords. Time, relentless elsewhere, pauses here. You can hear it, the soft, eternal rhythm of legend folding into sleep. The story of Ragnar Lothbrok will continue in voices and dreams, in firesides and whispered tales. But for now, it's your turn to let go. Breathe in. Breathe out. Feel the world slow. The saga is yours, and it rests with you, calm and complete, carried into dreams as gently as a longship gliding through still waters.